I was intrigued that informative 6 on page 42 talks about a bat survey. Not a bat survey, it talks about if they find bats. Whereas for years, we've always, definitely with residential development, always insisted on having a bat survey before any application can even go in, let alone be approved. I'm just interested whether that's a change of policy or why that's done that way. It doesn't matter, but it's just really so we know how things are done. On the flooding, I understand all the tests and the improvements and the extra 30%. The only thing that concerns me is foul drainage, and there's no mention of that. It's something that we've suffered across the borough from when there is flooding in areas, that has then infiltrated foul drainage systems and caused, as it were, a more unpleasant remain than we've had before. So be interested to hear from that. And one comment on the traffic. Clearly the recommendation is there, and I don't see any reason to refuse on that. But if we think the differences from 10 to 15 years ago, there is awkward right turning into the Holford side, just a few yards down the road. There's been a cycleway put in there, and I just wonder, outside of this application, whether the whole white lineage should be reviewed in that area to see if it could be more helpful to people getting in and out of both sides. But that's not I'm not associating that necessarily with this planning application. Thank you, Chairman. So it's the drainage and the bats.
So I couldn't pick up the drainage one, I don't know much about bats. But just to kind of confirm, the drainage, the cellular storage drainage that's being proposed is being taken on by Thames Water. And just to confirm in relation to the foul drainage issues, there are, the gullies have got trapped, they've got the trap gullies, they've got petrolid steps, etc. to prevent any of the bits we don't want to get into the watercourse to get into it, and also to prevent when there's events of flooding that actually they can't come back up through the gullies to bring any foul up into the open air. So hopefully that should provide some assistance.
With regard to ecology, a phase 1 survey was submitted, and our ecologists had a look at it and they had no issue. They didn't even ask for the bats informative. I put that on as sort of a fail-safe that if bats are found, then just to inform them that they will need to do something. But our ecology team didn't have a concern with it on that regard, and the proper information was submitted.
Did you want a response on the cycleways?
Yeah, I've got a suitable nod from
Okay, we'll take it away. I've got Malcolm, then Bill.
Okay, just got a simple question really. Do you say all the hotel rooms are on floors 2, 3 and 4? The ground floor has service type areas, is that right?
Yeah, the ground floor is simply the reception area, the big eating restaurant and the coffee.
Okay. And so where's all the things like air conditioning and pumping equipment? Is that all on the roof, is it? Or is it actually down to the level where it could be flooded?
There will be some plants and equipment on the ground floor, I believe, because as part of the noise assessment they show acoustic fencing around them. So that is proposed to the rear of the building. With regard to the Costa and Beefeater, it will have to go to they're on the ground floor, so they can't go any higher above that. I'm not aware that there's any significant plant or machinery above that on the hotel.
Okay. Well, it's only because really if there is any flooding in the area and all the electrical and other emergency stuff is in that area, there's a bigger risk as well. However,
so I can just quickly say one thing to that. The hotel is in flood zone 2, not flood zone 3. So
that's unsuitable. Thank you.
Thank you. Just, I'm fully support the application. I think it's a wonderful asset to the area, but just a couple of concerns. I mean, we've gone through the highway issue, but I'm still concerned that you mentioned about the entering the site, making a right-hand turn, but it's the exiting the site and making the right-hand turn going up to the Showcase roundabout that seems to be more my concern. Having travelled that route, and I did it again tonight, the traffic is actually queuing there to get up to the traffic lights at St Andrews Cross Road all the way down, and I can see that you would have cars exiting there sort of straddling the road waiting for somebody coming down to the Showcase Cinema to give them an exit. And it just concerns me that it's quite a difficult manoeuvre to make and possibly can cause greater congestion. So that's my first thought. The other thing is, you talked about the boundary of the trees on the housing side, but on the frontage there are a number of trees and bushes that are there, and I could imagine that Premier Inn and Costa would like their hotel and coffee shop to be visible. So how many of those trees will be removed to show that the hotel is there?
Yeah, but I'll just answer your question on the tree and landscaping. There will be some planting removed, and that at the moment is the ornamental planting with the existing office, like as you usually get in car parks, that sort of low-level planting. And there is some trees to be removed, smaller ones here. We met the agent on site with our tree officer and discussed it through in terms that essentially nothing's been agreed yet in terms of landscaping. There is a condition to secure that, but the reason we met is to agree some broad sort of principles, which we did come to an agreement on. There will be some thinning of the scrub planting, the main structural planting, including the mature trees, and to the left there's sort of a historic hedgerow as well, which we were keen to retain, and it has been retained. That will all be kept. So there will be more views in to what there is now, but the extent of that is yet to be agreed, and our landscape team are obviously keen to come to a happy medium where there are views into the building as which helps the applicant and the commercial viability of it. There's enough screening to soften the impact of it. And overall, we felt that the landscaping sort of proposal they came up with was broadly acceptable, subject to the finer detail. Another thing to note is, probably can't quite make it out there, but the red line doesn't go all the way to the road. There is quite a large highway verge which is outside of their control, and that has quite a lot of planting on at the moment, so they wouldn't be permissible to remove any of that. But essentially our landscaping, we've discussed it in quite some depth. There's large areas of greenery and vegetation around, and the indication is that all the main structural elements of that will be maintained.
Okay,
Sorry, yeah, in terms of the traffic assessment, I fully appreciate the comments you've made in terms of potential queuing to the roundabout. Clearly, as a couple of people mentioned, there are some changes like to come in the future, which aren't hopefully as long away as some people may feel. But in terms of, as I mentioned earlier, the assessment we got them to do for the access, pretending it was around for the cycles to understand the worst case, we do need to bear in mind that there is something on site that can open again tomorrow as an office use which generates a level of trips. And when we've done that assessment, there is marginal difference between the two, and on that basis there isn't a reason to look at this application in a negative light, considering the comparison of the existing use versus this proposed use that's coming in.
I'm going to say, well, as a person that lives very local to it, you have got those superstores, Halfords, Wickes and the pet shop, and they've got the same thing there, people wanting to turn right, and it does seem to be...
They can't turn right coming out though, can they?
They do.
No, well, they shouldn't do. It's a left turn only. They tend to, at the moment, turn left, go up and use the access to this building to do a U-turn. So, yeah, maybe that may become more prevalent, but they can't do a U-turn there. But the fact is, by the law, they cannot come out of Wickes and turn right onto the Reading Road.
Yes.
Right, John?
I support this, and I think it's a good use of this site, but much like the previous councillor's comments, would it be possible to have a keep clear a box outside where you turn right so people don't actually block the access? Would that be possible?
It's something that we would, well, it's a separate matter, so I wouldn't want to link it to the
No,
planning
I'm not
application.
thinking it, I'm just asking whether or not it's something that you could consider.
It's something we can go away and have a look at, yes. We can take the way to look. It's not something that's typically done. For the reason we do it to one, you may start getting residents asking for it at their driveways, other turnings, and we end up with it all the way up the road.
I think you'll find there is actually 6 on that road already.
Okay, well then, if there's already something set, we can have a look to potentially add something in. It's maybe something we can review to see if it's required, rather than actually get on and do it straight away.
Okay, but it's only a bit of paint on the road. It avoids.
It requires, it's not just, we need to do obviously a traffic regulation order to obviously input that, because it becomes something that we can try and enforce as well.
Could it be an informative so it's not forgotten, so we've got it?
Just in plain terms.
Not if it's not related or necessary as a result of the development.
It would be related to the development because the traffic's coming
No,
from
so
the development.
necessary as a result of the development.
Well, that's Chinese, isn't it? I mean, say it will be. Basically, if it's related to the development, the traffic's coming out of that development, so it will be related to that
But we
development.
don't know yet it's necessarily required for that.
Objections to this?
So that was why I was coming back to that, could it be an informative, because we put that in it. I just want it recorded somewhere, that was the reason I'm asking to be an informative. Otherwise it's just going to go down in perhaps your notes somewhere. Rochelle, if you can help.
Yes, could it possibly just say the planning committee would like to see a, a keep clear at this site? Yes, to avoid a problem. We're being proactive.
Minutes rather than.
We're being proactive rather than trying to.
Chairman, would you rather officers write separately to the applicant to say what members' preference was?
How would it be the applicant to do that road?
Well,
Well,
why would
Should
it?
this be?
Yeah. It gets to the point of why you want it as an informative. Because the decision notice is the applicant's permission.
Right.
So it doesn't bind, the informative doesn't bind the applicant to do it.
No, I
Likewise,
realise that, yeah.
So
Yeah,
your informative doesn't necessarily achieve your aim.
no, you're right.
Angus, Angus.
Angus,
Just on that, is it relevant the fact that the red line actually only starts well into the site?
right. So I'm thinking of, go with the question, John.
Can I set this fairly quickly? Can I just ask that the highways look at it, and if they consider it's necessary, they put the keep clear section in just outside there?
It's fine, yeah.
Right. And the last point, Arabella, if you could put that in the minutes. Yes, we can put that in the minutes. Right. Members, anyone else want to speak on this application? Okay. Right. We've got the recommendation then, starting on page 35, with the conditions as they are set out. There is, on the members' update, you've got the taking out of condition 13, and then you've got the added condition for the lighting, and then obviously there's the informatives. All those in favour of this application, please show. And that is unanimous. Thank you, members. I'd just like to say good evening to our mayor. It's nice of you to join us tonight. I think you just all come to see how things happen.
Well, I sat on here for many years, in the 2002 to 6, so I've just come along to see how you're progressing.
Well, it's good to have you here and a good lady as well, so thank you.
Thank you.
Right. As we've already said, the Sutton Business Park application has been deferred, so we move on to the last item, which is agenda item number 49 on page 83, which is 21 to 26 Tate Lane, Hurst. It's an application to vary conditions 2, 12, 15 and 17 of the Planning Commission 162529 for 11 dwellings. It's before the committee as the applicant is Woking Housing Limited, and we did have a site visit back in November 16, which I and several members of this committee attended. The case officer is Pooja Kumar, who I shall hand over to.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. The proposed amendments that are before the Planning Committee this evening relate to amendments to Plot 1 and the addition of a disabled parking bay to the front of Plot 1 to accommodate the needs of future occupants, an increase in the footprints of Plots 2, 11 and numbers 5 to 8, which are all 3-bedroom properties, to ensure the floor areas meet the national space standards, and the provision of an independent rear access to Plots 3 and 10. As a result of these alterations, there is proposed to be an alteration to the location of the first floor, approved first floor side windows, and a revised arboricultural impact assessment, which has been submitted by the applicant. Here is a comparison between the approved and proposed site layout. The proposed amendments, although material, are considered not to result in a significant alteration to the approved site layout and scheme. The changes do not result in the increase in the density of the site or in the number of units proposed. The changes in terms of the visual alterations to the approved scheme would be minor. Plot 1 is the plot which is being the most amended. The footprint of the bungalow is getting wider, and the property is going from a 3-bed to a 4-bedroom property, and this is due to the needs of the proposed future occupants of the site. However, as a result of the changes, there will be no amendments to the separation distances from the properties located to the rear of the site. Plots 2 and 11 would have an enlarged footprint, which would result in the creation of a rear gabled roof and relocation of approved first floor side windows. Under the previous application, the 3-bedroom properties were 0.5 square metres short of meeting national space standards, and as a result of these amendments, the dwellings would exceed the space standards. Plots 5 to 8 also are 3-bed properties, and these would have an enlarged footprint to meet national space standards. In respect of character and appearance, the proposed scheme is considered not to be significantly different to the approved scheme. The changes would result in minor visual alterations to the approved development, and these are considered not to have a greater urbanising impact than what has already been approved by the Planning Committee. The proposal is considered to maintain acceptable separation distances from neighbouring properties. In respect of the amendment to Condition 17, the proposal would maintain first floor side windows as obscure glazed and non-opening up to a height of 1.7 metres, so there will be no overlooking as a result of the revised scheme. As per the previous application, there are no objections in respect of highway safety and parking. The proposed amendments would include the provision of one additional parking bay, which would be a disabled parking bay to the front of Plot 1, and the proposal continues to meet the borough's parking standards. The applicant has submitted a revised arboricultural impact assessment, and this suggests the removal of 3 Category C trees. However, the proposed plans include the provision of 5 replacement trees within Plots 1 and 2, and therefore Trees and Landscape Officers have raised no objection to this amendment. As Chairman advised earlier, members carried out a site visit last year in November, and here are some photos from that site visit. So to the top is the entrance to the cul-de-sac, and on the right are the dwellings that are proposed to be removed. The existing properties are down at the bottom. As a reminder for members, these are the amendments that are before the committee. It's not the principle of development, it is just these amendments that are being proposed to the approved scheme. Within the members' update, there is a clarification that the ward member would be involved in the subsequent discharge of conditions application for external materials, and this was requested at the previous planning committee as well in November last year. So subject to the conditions in the officer's report and the application, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 2 speakers registered, and the first one is Derek Hurdles, resident. Good evening.
Thanks, good evening. I have a number of issues I'd just like to take you through. If I could just, please, when you looked at this application, when you took pictures for this application, it bears no resemblance to what's actually going on on a day-to-day basis up and down Tate Lane. And when you submitted when you put on your website the original planning application, it had 22 car parking spaces. And we were quite happy with that. We didn't object to it at all. We live right next door to this property. 60% of the boundary extends right down our garden from front to back. So, you know, we see it every day. We were quite happy with the 22 parking bays. They were spaced out across the site, and they were quite reasonable. What's now being created following that planning meeting is a 7-bay car park right on the corner of Tate Lane. And frankly, if Wokingham Housing were able to manage these properties the way they should, there wouldn't be an issue and I wouldn't be here. But they patently can't. And if you look at these pictures, is what happens. This is 2014. Keep going. At any one time, there's a dozen vehicles parked, either on the grass verge, just outside the boundary site on highway land, or in Tate Lane itself. These are commercial vehicles. They're large vans, they're pickup trucks, they're caravans, they're mobile homes. And it's just absolutely appalling. Now, if you're going to create a 7-bay parking area, can you go back, please? That's what it's going to look like. It looks fine when there's cars parked in it, or maybe it doesn't look too fine, but it looks quite reasonable. Can you imagine what that will look like with the kind of vehicles that are parked there today? Because within the actual planning approval, there is no restrictions on what kind of vehicle can be parked in this area. Excuse me. I mean, you talk about visual amenity, you talk about impact on local residents. This could actually be appalling. We thought that when this application went through, that was going to be the end of the problem. What it stands a chance of doing right now is just making the problem worse with more properties and more vehicles of the type and size that are allowed to be parked there today. So I have a request, please, to look at this again. You know, under the last application, the 22 bays were within parking standards. There's no reason to increase the number of parking bays in Tate Lane beyond that standard, provided the properties are used for the purpose for which they were designed, which is residential. And if you do happen to approve the parking down there, then please, if you can apply covenants about parking bays can't be leased or sold, you can also apply covenants as to what can be parked in these bays, which normal builders, many builders do anyway as a matter of course these days. So that's the basis of why I wanted to speak to you. I'm sorry that I did circulate some of this because I was unaware of the procedure around what happens here. But in summary, please think again about the parking, because Wokingham Housing have given no assurances whatsoever that within their lease conditions they're going to apply any kind of control whatsoever over vehicles.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the final speaker we have then registered is Darren Toes from Wokingham Housing. Welcome.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to say a few words in support of our application this evening. The scheme is a revision of our original application, which obviously was previously approved, although by and large the development remains the same as viewed from the public realm. The main alterations are to plot 1, which has been adapted for a specific end user who is disabled, and we've worked with our Wokingham Borough Council colleagues to ensure the layout and design needs meet that particular family's needs. We believe plot 1's variants are minimal, as the vernacular style, bridge level and eaves heights remain as originally permitted. And with respect to the parking, to plot 1, this is increased due to the increased number of bedrooms, bringing the parking in line with the authority's parking requirements, and this is additional provision is in the form of a disabled parking bay. I just need to make it clear that we're acting as agents for Wokingham Borough Council's housing. If there are issues in relation to how that is managed, that's an issue for Wokingham Borough Council's housing department rather than us as just development agents. Other alterations include the 3-bedroom units are slightly deeper to meet the bedroom sizing guidance for social housing. The back gardens, existing building relationships and private amenities are still unaffected. And finally, the landscaping and parking provisions, we believe, have altered improved householder access and privacy with levels of landscaping enhanced. Obviously, we hope you'll look favourably upon this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just
Okay, Chris, could you just come back on the car parking in particular, the restriction on vehicles?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to point out, just at the moment the application was consented a number of months back now, and obviously the application in front of us is only for the variation of these conditions to add one disabled space. I think in terms of this isn't open market housing, this is to affordable housing, and obviously it will be managed by a housing company. It's not in the public highway, and as such we have no control over applying measures. Highways can't apply any physical restrictions to those parking spaces which are theoretically in private ownership, and it will be down to the management company that operates and owns these buildings to apply any restrictions.
I'm sure members are going to come back on that, but I'll now just go to the ward member, Wayne.
Yes, myself, I know Derek Birtles very well. I probably spend far too much time dealing with the problems on this junction, and I have shared with Mr. Birtles the new tenancy agreement that will be enforced when new residents move into this development. It is a shame that we're doing great things, and yet we can't control the way that our tenants use and abuse our existing housing, because it is a mess and they shouldn't be allowed to go on. But I think it's been allowed to go on far too long, and I've agreed with Simon that when this takes place and when this is built, it needs to be stamped on day one. Because the way that the roads and the grass verges and the driveways are treated, in any normal private situation, it wouldn't be allowed to continue. I know it's not a planning issue, and as I've given Mr. Birtles my reassurance, as he knows, I'll be down there every week if necessary to make sure that this doesn't go on when these lovely houses are built. The only other thing I would say that I do need to, and I know I am going to be involved in the landscaping towards the front, because there is a very large highways verge that, if not dealt with properly, it will be another area where not vehicles are parked, caravans, commercial vehicles, scrap vehicles, etc., like goes on now. So I know it's not a planning issue, but it's something that Mr. Birtles has my reassurance that we will get right, and if necessary, as I said, I'll be down there every week.
Thank you, Wayne. Who else would, John?
I understand this. I'm listening to Wayne and Mr. Birtles. Why would we not ask, or can we not ask for the parking here to be allocated?
Some is allocated to the unit, so there's allocated provision one per unit, and there's one unallocated per unit, just to allow for that better spread. So rather than fix it to 2 per dwelling, it's 1 per dwelling, and then there's for visitors, for people that may have one car but who may have a free car, so they have that ability to, rather than park on the carriageway if they've got free cars, which I feel they wouldn't have because this should conform to standards, that they'll park in one of their own and one of the unallocated if needed.
Could CPE could control any of this parking, could it?
No, because no, it's all in private property, so it's none of it's on the public highway.
It's private property owned by the council?
Yes, but doesn't carry the highway rights. The CPE would only come into play if, for example, there's yellow lines or an enforcement already on the carriageway and they were parking on the verge behind that yellow line, which meant that the CPE could then potentially enforce those traffic measures.
But there would be nothing to stop the council using an outside enforcement company to enforce the rules?
I can't comment on what they might, but it's theoretically it's a private car park for say, and if they put up parking, whatever they wish to do, parking, clamping, it's down to them how they wish to manage their private on-site. The difficulty is it's not your typical car park. You have the parking, the parking is kind of split up across obviously this one's the newest one down here. The parking's broken up quite a lot across the front, which to some degree, I know you've got the verge on the other side of the road, which you may have fear about people parking on it, but the way the parking has been spread and widened across the front should prevent people from parking to the front, because they'll be blocking an adjacent parking space which is not in their control or not available to them. So it may be that there are measures we could look at to, if you look at the landscaping, to plant up the verge on the far side to prevent parking on the verge, knee-high rails, those types of measures which can be addressed.
Okay, I think it's a great scheme. I think it's a scheme to deliver affordable housing. But could I ask you, Chairman, if you could write a letter from the Planning Committee asking the housing bit of the council whether or not what they will be and asking them what they will be doing to actually control the parking on this site. I think that's quite important. It's not a planning issue, as everybody says, but it would be nice to know.
Would members like me to do that? Is it nods all round? Okay. Any other member wishing to speak? No? Okay. My recommendation then is set out on page 84 for approval with the conditions. And on members' update, there are no new conditions. So all those in favour, please show. That is unanimous, so application is passed. Thank you. Right, that ends the meeting if public would like to leave. Thank you.